Test. Oh, what a beautiful voice.
Oh, dear. Tuesday, February 10th. To order, 7 o'clock. Welcome council and audience members. Looking for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
By now, you should know how this works. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Public participation. Either of you got anything that you'd like to make comment of or? Participate. Absolutely. The microphone at the podium is on. Please speak directly into it and
okay, you guys.
yeah, you got to get right into it. It's got to be like right up at your.
Gail Johnston, is that working?
Well, how come that's not very loud? If the light's on.
Check, check.
Gail just has a very light voice.
Yeah, you're just going to have to be forceful.
Okay. Gail Johnston, 245 Shipsview Place. I've spoken to you guys about this issue before. I've written to you, spoken to this council, the city planners, and even the fire chief about the Ocean Grove development. I have also spoken to you before about the format of these council meetings. Last time I was upset that close to 100 residents were made to sit through almost an hour of issues unrelated to Ocean Grove before discussions on the Ocean Grove project came before you. You wonder why there is little public input, yet you don't seem to make it easy for us to participate. A lot of people don't have time to come here and sit through a whole meeting to wait for a discussion. Again tonight, Ocean Grove discussions are the last on your agenda, except for the very first one under new business. I know that you have heard it all before, but an important decision will be voted on tonight. One that will permanently change the face of our most valuable asset, the Esquimalt Lagoon, my community. As residents and taxpayers, we should be able to come and hear the conversations for the pros and cons of this development in a timely manner. Why is this the last issue on tonight's agenda? And I think this gentleman is from the Ocean Grove, so he's going to have to sit through the whole thing too. I guess I can leave now and wait to hear your discussions and the outcome of this meeting in a few days when you post the video online. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just trying.
She's talking about bylaws. It's the last bylaw.
Oh. I guess just to answer, it's just a formality of the way our agendas are pre-scheduled or pre-described. But point to note, when we have, an issue like that, maybe we can do a bit of switching around. It's not uncommon for that to happen. Usually not the bylaws thing because it goes through all the other parts of it. But point taken. Thank you. The other gentleman? Anything? You're good? Okay. We shall move on then for Mayor's message. I hope everybody had a wonderful family day yesterday and enjoyed yourselves. We have another engagement with Our Place coming up. As it's pointed out. Anyways, we have another Our Place event coming up, so I'm waiting to hear from you guys whether you're available. Terry said she would. We have 2 members of council that are away this evening by scheduled leave, so we are a small council this evening, but we're mighty. Looking to move on, folks. Adoption of the minutes for regular meeting of council January 26th.
So moved.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking to receive a number of minutes for cycling advisory January 5th, emergency planning September 16th, planning and land use January 20th, and transportation public infrastructure January 13th.
Move receipt.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Nothing in the way of correspondence requiring council direction this evening. New business planning and land use committee. Director of planning, are you taking this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is going to be a team effort on the part of myself and the Director of Engineering. This memorandum was called for by Council with regard to providing options for revisions to particular items associated with the Ocean Grove rezoning and a Fish Creek Plan Amendment. So on January 12th, Council directed staff to prepare draft bylaws that would amend the Fish Creek Plan designation and zoning for the Ocean Grove development. And in conjunction with this resolution, Council also directed staff as follows. That staff be directed to provide further information on potential revisions to the following conditions of rezoning. First is E, providing flashing amber pedestrian signals and associated crosswalk civil works on Lagoon Road at the intersection of Heatherbell Road, including extra signals to extend the visibility of the signals around the corner uphill on Lagoon Road. Works to be completed concurrent with off-site infrastructure upgrades on Lagoon Road. And secondly, to redesign, it was I in the amenity package, redesign intersection of Machosen Road to include traffic signal as in J below, including provision of a left turn lane from Machosen Road to Lagoon Road, construct the civil works required to install the left turn lane as per recommendation in the Boulevard Traffic Impact Assessment Report. Works to be completed within 12 months following the final adoption of the rezoning bylaw amendment. And lastly, that the timelines for Seafield Road improvements be reviewed by staff and report back to Council prior to public hearing. So tonight we've got a memorandum that touches on the first 2 issues. We're still working with the developer on the timing of Seafield Road, but we can speak to those negotiations tonight. And I'll pass it over to the Director of Engineering to talk about what's been proposed in this memorandum.
So the concern, as I understand it, is the 2 hidden driveways, which are between Melbourne Road and Heatherbell junctions as you go downhill on Lagoon Road. And the problematic driveway is the second driveway, which is, it is on.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem too is the overhead fans.
Okay,
drifting.
is that better?
Well, that's right.
Okay. I'll just speak very close to the microphone. Okay, so that second driveway is really invisible till you turn the corner. And the posted speed on Lagoon Road is 40 kilometers an hour, but there is a 30 kilometer hour warning for that section, for the double bend section. And at 30 kilometers an hour, the driveway shouldn't really be a problem. The problem is trying to make sure that people actually do 30 kilometers an hour. And I think we discussed this issue at length, and I think all we can do is a hidden driveway sign to let them know what the issue is, and repeat the 30 kilometer an hour warning, which can go on the same side as the sign as the hidden driveway. And then I've given some examples of paint marking that would really draw people's attention to the fact that this is a particular hazard coming up around the corner. If you can imagine those zigzag lines on that corner, which is already tight enough that it's hard to exceed 40K. And then the other one with the big 30 symbol and slow down, I think we would have done everything we can possibly do to get their attention.
Comments, questions? Councillor Day?
Thank you. We had heard recently about some mobile speed bumps that were being implemented in Colwood Creek Park. I would just wondered if they had been considered for this location.
We don't normally put them on major roads like that. I mean, the major road, it's a fairly heavily used collector road for that area, I'm a bit concerned about the steepness of the hill. Speed bumps aren't usually put on hills like that, and part of the issue is it increases the difficulty of getting uphill if the road's slippery. So I think it would be it's probably the last thing we would want to consider. Yeah, sorry, that just dealt with one item, but I'm happy to take questions in the middle. That works well. So the redesign of the intersection of Machosen Road, if you look at the sort of third paragraph under that heading, that was my response to the issue of vehicle access off Machosen Road for the development of the church property. And basically, if there's no commercial there, there's no necessity for an access off Machosen Road to the site. And I would argue that the increased complication of that area when you have a school and a school crossing means that there should be no access off Machosen Road. If it's a commercial, if there is commercial proposed there, which I'm not sure there is right now, but were there to be, then obviously the commercial would not stand much chance of survival without an in off Machosen Road. But there doesn't need to be an exit, and an in that situation is only very slightly problematic. It would be any exiting traffic that would be the problem. And I think if those recommendations are followed, then the proposed traffic signal at Machosen and Lagoon wouldn't be impacted by the church property at all because it's far enough away. The other issue that we haven't covered in here is in any detail is the issue of exactly when Seafield Road should be done, and we've actually prepared a table of when all of the improvements are required, and it's very, very heavily weighted towards the middle of the process. So the relatively light improvements until you get to about 350 units, and then all of a sudden you have to spend a lot of money to be able to get the 351st unit, which seems problematic from the point of view of creating a hurdle, which slight turn in the economy, and you could find they stop at 350 units and say, well, it's not worth going on until this thing turns around. Whereas if we were to make the requirements much more spread out over the entire project, it would work better in that for every little piece of the project you get something. One of the improvements, instead we've got improvements grouped in one spot the way we've got it laid out right now. So we need to discuss that with the developer, and then we'd like to bring that to council in detail.
So if I could just go over the recommendation. So staff are recommending that it be made a condition of rezoning RZ 14-003 through the terms included in registrable development agreement that a hidden driveway sign repeat with 30 km/h warning sign after Milburn Road on Lagoon Road and line painting solutions to emphasize the slow down message to drivers be provided on Lagoon Road by the developer within 12 months following final adoption of the rezoning bylaw amendment to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Just because I happen to live down there too, I have been in the situation where I've been on Lagoon trying to turn onto Heatherbell, and I've stopped. I'm going down the hill, and I've had to stop because there's oncoming traffic the other way, and I've had to actually accelerate because I saw the person behind me, and they weren't going to be able to stop in time. My concern is as we increase the population, we're going to need to put a crosswalk there. Because kids are going to need to get across the road too, and which is going to force even more vehicles to have to be stopping at Heatherbell, and I'm just very not comfortable with the fact that we as a city think that the only thing we can do is put a hidden driveway sign to sort of interact that. I understand the dilemma we're in, but I think long term we're going to end up with somebody seriously getting hurt if we don't figure out what we're going to do long term with that S-curve, and that's my concern with this. I'm not against this motion today, but I don't know if this is the end result of it, or like I'm very concerned. I don't know how we engineer this moving forward.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess just one comment. If it's an issue when the development occurs, it's probably an issue now. So, it's not that I don't love it when developers, are made responsible to pony up for the costs. But I think in this situation, if it's already an issue, it's something that the city should be doing anyways. And unfortunately under our own dime, but we should do it anyways. And the sooner the better, rather than having to wait the 12 months. I'm not sure what the cost is, but I'm just not sure that that's necessarily fair to add as a condition if it's something that's occurring, and it's something that's probably relatively easy to deal with soon, as opposed to waiting within 12 months. But
yeah, the cost would be fairly light. It's one signpost and two signs, a couple of $100, and the line painting wouldn't add much, so it isn't a huge deal. As for other solutions, we did consider a stop sign. And because that would be around the corner, it's effectively achieves nothing. We considered a traffic light. They're really not recommended on slopes like that because of the issue of somebody trying to beat the light as they will, and then they get a red and they've got to slam on their brakes on a hill. We didn't consider drastic options like relocate Heatherbell intersection somewhere else, or make that section of Laguna one way, and you got to go down via Milburn. But it's a situation that really doesn't have any great solutions.
I'm just wondering, Michael, if, like Councillor Day mentioned speed humps or something along that line, but instead of that, what about rumble strip kind of cuts in there that would, do the same thing but not put obstacles in the way? Yeah. A few warning up, more at the Milburn, section, so that you're hitting that and slowing down as you come around that corner, in there, because it might be a bit more suitable to.
Yeah, I think perhaps a drastic change in the surface texture, which would act as a rumble strip and also give you better traction if you had to slam on your brakes.
Yeah,
that's probably a useful addition. Yeah.
The other thing is the sign painting is rather road line painting is rather interesting, but is that something that people are going to recognize, or are they going to think that the sign paint or line painter stopped off for lunch somewhere?
Well, one of the great ways to slow people down is to make them puzzled. and it's in use. I mean, there's one example, but it's in
That's
use
the first time I've seen anything
elsewhere. It's
like
usually
that.
used on the approach to a crosswalk, but there is a crosswalk there, and it makes the road look narrower, and it really wakes you up to the fact there's something here you need to pay attention to. And whenever a driver gets that feeling, there's an automatic hesitation in applying more speed.
Yeah, and I just didn't want anybody being confused and, run over somebody's front yard or something instead. But yeah, I think maybe looking at the rumbles kind of cuts there might be of benefit.
Yeah, if you want to add that to whatever motion is made at the end, that'd be great.
I can't do the motion thing, but you guys can do it. Councillor Nault.
Just a quick question to staff. The recommendation is pretty small. Is this going to be in addition to the original recommendations of the flashing pedestrian signals and the redesigned intersection at Machosen Road?
Yeah, absolutely. At times when Rob's car isn't there to protect the pedestrians, the flashing light is essential.
And the second question, I don't have the timing of those two improvements in front of me. What were those scheduled for originally?
Within 12 months of rezoning, same as is proposed in this recommendation.
Okay, and I guess the final question is the original traffic report was based on build-out of approximately 500 odd units, and now we're in excess of 700. Does that change the traffic flows of the whole project, or I'm thinking that if we get the 700 there and we get the development on Seafield and we also get Pacific Landing or whatever it is, Essentia, etc. If we get those all together, all coming out of Heatherbell and all going through Machosen Road, I want to make sure that we design the intersection and so forth adequately to handle the traffic. So has that been considered as part of this, or will it be considered before the intersection is designed? My concern is the traffic report is quite out of date by now.
There was a fresh report done, but it only took into account Ocean Grove's increase. We don't have a report that actually deals with both Ocean Grove and Essentia, as far as I'm aware. If there is an increase in Essentia, or Pacific Landing, sorry.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move that the city install a hidden driveway sign, repeat the 30-kilometer-an-hour, and Pat, please wordsmith it if you need to. Hidden driveway sign, repeat the 30-kilometer-an-hour warning sign after Millburn Road on Lagoon Road, and line painting solutions to emphasize the slowdown messages to drivers, as well as the installation of rumble strips on Lagoon Road. Does that capture?
I just want to be clear that you're saying that the city do this, that it's not a condition of rezoning.
Correct.
Oh, the city do.
Before we make that motion, looking at staff, did you want us to investigate the rumble strips, or did you want us to actually? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's going to be a good idea. Yeah, because of the texturizing of the asphalt, we would not make it those little smooth rumble strip heads. We'd make it a very strong texture in the asphalt to give us that braking effect as well.
If I could just ask for clarification, so the recommendation is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposed motion would be to take everything for that's in the recommendation along with rumble strips for it to be carried out by the city and not the developer? Okay.
I know we're at a point in time on budget discussions and that sort of thing, so it would have to be added as a consideration to budget. Right?
Sorry, was that a reference to the cost of this in the budget?
Well, let's get a seconder first of all. last call for a seconder on the motion. Seeing none, there is no motion.
I'll make the same motion, except that the developer pay for it.
Staff recommend.
Well, but including the rumble strip. So exactly what Gordy said, except that it would be part of the developer responsibility. I'll second that.
Conversation, discussion. Councillor Logan.
Again, I it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't support or not support one of these things. But it's really, it's such a small cost item and it's something that should be done now as opposed to waiting 12 months. And I guess that's my concern, where we know there's a safety concern out there that exists already. And we're going to say, you know what, we're just going to throw the $400 on the developer instead of, dealing with the issue now. And so, I just wonder what liability that puts us in, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of chicken shit. Personally, pardon my French, on such a small item. But that's just my opinion.
With respect, I understand exactly what Councillor Logan is saying, and I'd be happy to look at amending. I don't mind the city paying for the sign, for example, but perhaps they could pick up the rumble strip cost. Because how much would that be, do you think?
I'd be hard pressed to put an estimate on it right now because we haven't thought through how we would do it. At the low end, it might be sort of $1,000, and at the higher end, it might be a couple of thousand. Right. I'm guessing.
And so I guess from my standpoint is as this developer comes out, I agree that the signs probably should go up immediately, but I would be more than willing to look at having the developer just pick up the rumble strip costs, because I do think that cost is a new cost that will be incurred because of that development coming out. But again, that's just my opinion. So, and we already do have a motion on.
Thank you. I'll just keep it brief. I do support the developer making a contribution to making it a safer neighborhood. There's been considerable density added to the neighborhood with the new development and others, as has been mentioned. So I'm sure that there will be other things for which we will be obligated to do the right thing and pick up the costs. But certainly I'd like to be looking at that in view of our whole budget and making it our plan for how we're treating every area of the municipality, not just one area. We're focusing on this one area specifically because of a development.
Anybody else?
Sorry, just in rebuttal to that, I guess the only thing that I heard from Councillor Logan is there is something that should be done immediately. And I mean, it is a shame that we would be waiting 12 months if we expect the developer to do this. And what liability does that put on us? If we think that this is a necessity, but we're waiting 12 months, that is a bit of a concern too.
So you've changed the
No, I haven't. I
thought you were going to change the motion that we pay for the sign.
I've made that suggestion, but I think I don't know how we would do that initially. I don't think, can I amend a motion, or does it have to be somebody? The original? Yeah, I did. I had Jason.
Yep.
We could. You could propose an amendment.
An amendment to it, and then.
Yeah.
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll propose that. I will propose that and see if anybody's interested.
You have to be clear. What are you proposing?
I am proposing an amendment which says the city will pick up the cost of the signs, with the developer picking up the cost of the rumble strips. So, and the signs would be done immediately.
And whoever's doing the rumble strips has to do the line painting because that would come after the texturing. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Is that clear for everybody? So that's my
And
proposed amendment.
you accept the change on seconding it?
I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
What a team.
We are. Colwood sign bylaw 6.1.2, electronic message center amendment number 26. Is that falling to
Wow.
you leading in.
You betcha. Thank you, Your Worship. At our meeting last week, the Director of Planning gave a brief overview of the report, stating staff are proposing an amendment to the Colwood sign bylaw number 60 to better regulate the electronic message center signs. Such signs include flat screen video monitors and LED light displays. Staff are concerned that the spread of these signs will lead to creating safety hazards by distracting drivers on busy roadways, and the signs could also contribute to excessive light pollution and create eyesores in prime locations of the community that economic development strategy has identified as needing quality of place improvements to spur investment. The Director of Planning then added that the report presented to committee introduces the problems associated with electronic message center signs and proactively proposes regulatory amendments to the existing sign bylaw, adding that staff have recently seen an increased interest from property owners wanting to install EMCs along arterial roads. This has led staff to propose immediate amendments to the sign bylaw to proactively deal with what potential threat to the safety and aesthetics of the community. Staff spent a fair amount of time trying to craft proposed regulations that could be effectively enforced, as well as meet the test of higher level government legislation and would align with advice from the city's legal counsel. We did have some discussion as to whether we should share the report with the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for some input, but timing's everything, Your Worship, and staff sees it as important for this to be adopted as soon as possible due to the potential interest in installing these signs in our downtown area. It just turned out that the TPI meeting, I think, was the day before our planning and land use meeting, so the timing really sucked on this one to be able to share with our friends there. So the committee recommended, and I so move, that the January 28th, 2015 report from the planner regarding electronic message center signs be received, and that the proposed amendment bylaw number 1560 be forwarded to council for enactment.
Second. Discussion, council? Seeing none? Oh, yes?
No, sorry. In the report, it basically says that are basically land use bylaws. So our understanding for these regulations would not apply to existing signs, but would only apply to new signs, although staff would double check the matter prior. Can I get some clarification?
Yes. So we took that question back to the lawyers, and specifically what we wanted to clarify is the use, the proposed use regulations, so no flashing, etc. Could that be applied to existing signs? And our legal counsel said that no, their grandparenting status would not allow us to apply those regulations to existing signs.
Got a mover and second. Any other questions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6.2, Finance and Admin. 6.2.1, report, Director of Administration, new item regarding the roaming art gallery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the city's had a roaming art gallery agreement with a number of organizations since 2007. They've had a couple of name changes and a lot of the same people, but different societies that are holding the responsibility for the agreement with the city and the insurance and other liability issues for the artists. Recently, the staff have been talking with some of the representatives at the Coast Collective that is now actually managed by the Society for Arts on South Island, and they would like to expand the art gallery into other parts of City Hall. So through discussions that we had, it was determined that the artists aren't actually quite ready for taking on a number of locations in City Hall. They might not have enough artwork yet to display, or might be feeling really pressured and so withdrawing from the program. So we want to revisit that a little bit later, but we do want to make a small change, so not only to the name of the organization, but to the atrium where artwork is currently displayed all along the wall for the back of the council chamber. We have a small piece that we're going to remove from the gallery so that we can actually use it for displaying a lot of the city's own brochures and things like that that we want to message to the public, especially with the new design up at the front. But we'd like to add the Chief Administrative Officer's office to the current art gallery. So it really is just a matter of finding out if council supports the change. The name change to the Society for Arts on South Island DBA Coast Collective is mandatory because that's a new governing body for Coast Collective. And then the approval to change the sketch plan that goes with the current agreement. Coast Collective and their representatives have already looked at it and have approved it, and it's just up to the City Council to put their approval on it as well.
We need a mover and a seconder, please. Discussion, council? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 6.3, transportation and public infrastructure, frontage improvements for 2350 and 2356 Souk Road.
Madam Mayor, I am going to be declaring a potential conflict of interest to the being on the West Shore Park and Rec Board.
You can go stand outside.
Do some push-ups.
There you go. Who's going to lead in on this one? TPI?
Okay, no, I can take that. Sorry, just take a second to call this up. Transportation and Public Infrastructure Committee reviewed a request from the property owner of 2350 and 2356 Souk Road. He is rezoning his property to allow development of a gym. The properties have frontage both on Souk Road and Veterans Memorial Parkway. Part of the rezoning conditions, engineering suggested a sidewalk should be built around the corner from Souk Road frontage to the bus stop on the VMP. The property owner is applying for a variance permit, requesting a variance to the frontage improvement requirements. The required cost to do the frontage improvements is estimated at $135,000 towards sidewalk, drainage improvements, and lighting. The developer has indicated that it be reduced to approximately 60% or $81,000. Staff anticipates the reduced amount of cost would cover the sidewalk as far as the crosswalk at the corner radius between Souk and VMP. Upon reviewing this, committee generally agreed that the cost was fairly high for the improvement along VMP, that it would service only the bus stop, that it was actually, we felt, a provincial responsibility because VMP is a provincial thoroughfare, and the odds of that sidewalk ever connecting to anything else are negligible, and there's really no way to the properties off of there because you'd have to build a bridge across Colwood Creek. So the committee agreed with staff's comments, and we would recommend to council that council agree to the request by the developer of 2350 and 2356 Souk Road to vary bylaw 285 and the required frontage improvement works by constructing 60% of the required works measured by value, but prioritizing that section of the improvements that, in the opinion of the city engineer, provides the greatest safety improvement for pedestrians trying to access the bus stop on Veterans Memorial Parkway.
Second.
And I would so move.
Discussion, council? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Gonna get Councillor Martin. 6.3.2, Memorandum, City Engineer, TPI recommendations of February 2nd, proposal for warning labels on gas station nozzle toppers.
Thank you. We received a request to put warning labels on gasoline pumps to caution users that gasoline contributes to global warming and climate change. They all looked very good. We generally agreed that climate change and global warming were a serious problem. somewhat beyond the reach of Colwood City Council, unfortunately. But we do agree that we should support these warning labels going on gas pumps, but it should come at a much higher level than the city of Colwood, as Colwood only has, I believe, 4, maybe 5 gas stations. So we decided that we should support the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities motion that this be considered. So I'm looking for the exact recommendation here.
Right, page 2 of the report, I think.
I think I may have to speak to this. I wrote the memo as a result of the resolution.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, if I can add to what you said. So the resolution at Transportation and Public Works, Public Infrastructure, is at the beginning of the memo that staff be directed to inquire with West Vancouver on how the City of Colwood can support their initiative being put forward to UBCM. And we decided to contact West Vancouver straight away and find out what they were doing. And their resolution isn't actually ready yet. It will eventually be sent to this council once they've submitted it to UBCM. I believe that they send it to all councils at that time. But it was suggested to me that we might consider putting a resolution before the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, because the coastal communities are the ones that will be most affected by sea level rise, which is probably the largest effect we're going to see on the island. And since the deadline for submitting a resolution to them is February the 23rd, there isn't an opportunity to go back to TMPI and come back to council. So I've just given a potential draft resolution there if council wants to consider that. Otherwise, we could wait for the notice of the UBCM resolution before we decide whether to support that. And the potential resolution at AVICC is, whereas there is evidence that the combustion of petroleum products such as gas and diesel used in vehicles contribute to greenhouse gas emissions that affect natural systems in ways that are injurious to human health and to the natural environment upon which we all depend for food and life, that is very close to what was passed at North Van Council. My apologies, West Van Council. And then the next line is particular to AVICC, whereas sea level rise resulting from greenhouse gas emissions will cause significant harm to coastal communities. Therefore, let it be resolved that the AVICC support and will implement, where possible, legislation to require retailers of petroleum products to provide plastic sleeves, brackets novel toppers, with warning labels on pump handles for all fossil-based liquid fuels. And the one of the things raised in the meeting was, if Colwood did it on its own, it would, it's not very effective. Whereas if the whole island does it, then people can't choose a gas station that doesn't have the labels.
Councilor Martin?
I guess the West Vancouver, I've been in contact with Aaron, who did the presentation with us, and they sent me the motion that is going to UBCM.
Well, they have that now, do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would that all vendors and retailers, that one.
Yep.
Yeah. So would we not want to just replicate that, so that we stay consistent? I guess.
It depends whether you want to make particular reference to the vulnerability of coastal communities.
Right. Okay.
Councilor Day?
Thank you. It may lend more strength to the argument at AVICC to have it be about coastal communities, and then West Vancouver brings theirs in. Theirs comes through a different chapter, and then both resolutions, if they pass through the local chapter, would come to UBCM. So then there would be two resolutions that would be grouped in the same area. So it might make a slightly stronger message to have a slightly different wording, and it might be. It may possibly get more uptake at the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities.
Anyone else? Councillor Nault?
Thank you. I support that, and in the unlikely event this fails at AVICC, we can still support a similar motion going to UBCM from the City of Colwood or supporting the West Van solution. So I would move the recommendation that's read by the engineer. I'm sure he can provide a copy to staff so they don't have to write the whole thing out.
Seconder, please. Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. New item, Kelly Road Small Communities Fund, 6.3.3.
So I don't believe this one went to committee. No. So this is brought before you because of the work that's been done on Kelly. The public response has said that they would really like to see sewers go in before any road improvements are made. And we now have cost estimates for those sewers, as was requested and funded by council. And as you can see on the second page of the report, at the bottom, under financial implications, the cost to the city to complete the Kelly Road improvements with the sewer without a grant would be over $5.5 million. Which is clearly beyond the city's means, I would say. And we have there's now a grant funding available, which has a deadline in the near future that would reduce our cost to $1.8 million. So that's why that's brought forward. But I just want to go through the history of how we got here. And that's covered in the first full paragraph at the top of page 2. So this project started as a relatively small improvement. I believe it's about $780,000. And it was taken to the public, and it changed as a result of public input, and it also grew. The public's very keen to see sewers built, and they're keen to see it carry further down Kelly Road than we had allowed for. And this projected cost has now become, as I say, over $5.5 million. And if that project was undertaken even with a grant in this particular year, you'll see in the budget deliberations that you're going into that it would basically suck up all the money available for these types of projects. So I think there'll be a decision to defer this. That's, I imagine, it's going to be the decision made. But you also now have an economic development plan, which doesn't really emphasize work on Kelly Road. It emphasizes work in the city centre. And council may wish to prioritize work in the city centre over Kelly Road, particularly since sewers are already in the city centre. So one way to approach this is to make the grant application. You would have until 2023 to spend it. And so you could wait until you'd gathered enough road DCCs to support the city's part of it. Or you could, get the money allocated by the funding, by the granting body, and then later ask for it to be reassigned to city centre. I guess the point is not to let the opportunity pass without any attempt at getting a piece of that grant funding. If the grant is awarded, there is still time to consider exactly when and exactly where the funding would come from. So this proposed resolution is only about there we go. The council and the wording of the resolution is intended to support the grant. Without a council resolution, you can't make an application. Approve of applying for a new Building Canada Fund Small Communities Fund grant of $3,772,500 for 2/3 of the cost to construct Kelly Road infrastructure improvements from Souk Road to the city limits at the Galloping Goose Regional Trail. And approve of paying our 1/3 cost from DCCs. You can change that later as long as you pay the 1/3 cost from somewhere. You approve of staff costs to manage the grant project from engineering salaries, and approve of paying ongoing maintenance costs for Kelly Road after the project is completed from the road maintenance budget. So all of those approvals are necessary in order to get the grant, because they want to know that you are ready to pay the maintenance cost, and that you're ready to pay the staff costs, etc. Now, obviously, you don't have a lot of detail on that, and that's because the relatively short time before the applications close.
Councillor Martin and then Nault.
Thank you. Can you? I'm confused. Can you explain to me the difference between the Kelly Road improvements and why DCCs are picking up the 1.8 versus it falling in an LAS, and the LAS picking up the cost?
There is no LAS for Kelly Road.
So would we not create a new LAS for?
You can try that.
Or what would you what does the city perceive happening with that?
Well, I think
like how would we normally expect to have those costs paid? Like, don't we normally expect our residents of that area? I mean, every other area that has sewers has an LAS.
It's let's say this council has never considered the new normal. The old normal obviously was problematic, but we fixed, we think, most of those problems, and you could and you could go the LAS route, but of course if the people won't sign up for it, you can't create one. They may wish to sign up, they may not. And I think in order to keep the playing field as level as possible, council may want to say, well, you know, we don't want to put these sewers in within an LAS, but on the other hand, if you're doing it for economic development reasons, you know, you could be losing the opportunity for economic development because the current residents won't pay for the sewer. So you may end up, you know, trying to get the LAS to pay part of the cost and the city pay the rest. That's an option. I believe this sort of thing was discussed at a previous meeting, but in the end, none of that can actually be resolved right now. That would take time to resolve because you've got to hold meetings with the property owners along the road. You've got to send them a letter, giving them a deadline to petition against the creation of LAS, and then see what the result of that petition is.
Sorry, just
just
as
follow
a
up
follow-up
to
to that one. Well, but are we not putting ourselves at a legal risk if we're now in a situation where one area doesn't have an LAS and isn't responsible for paying sewer costs, whereas we're putting the residents of other areas and making them pay for it? Like, could not those other LASs, I know I might be one of them, that would say, well, that's not fair. Why does one part of the area of the city not have to pay for sewers, but I have to?
That
Like,
I can't imagine that there's any legal basis on which to bring a suit in that case. It might be a political difficulty for council.
Councillor Nault.
First, a couple comments on that. The New Building Canada Fund was one we covered at the recent leadership conference in Parksville. The total pot for all of British Columbia is $10 million over the course of this entire grant. The odds of us getting 3.7 million of that is fairly slim, I would think. I would still support the grant application because it would be wonderful to get it. I agree with Councillor Martin on the LIS because when I got put on sewers, basically the city held a gun to my head and said, "You're hooking up by June or we'll hook you up and you'll still pay for it." So I'm a different situation because this Colwood Centre got sewered by council resolution and not by an LIS. But I have been paying for that on my tax bill for something like 15 years, and I would feel very upset if somebody else now got sewers and I had to pay for those as well. So I would support the recommendation, but I would recommend we find alternate ways rather than DCCs to pay for them. But I guess the important thing, if I understand, is we commit that we would be willing to pay 1/3 of the cost. Is that correct? Thank you.
Councillor Logan and then Dave.
Councillor Davis.
Okay, right.
Thanks. I'm just curious because the Building Canada Fund was discussed along with a couple of other funding opportunities. I'm just wondering if this is the right project to put forward to that fund, and would not the sewage treatment facility that we might want to build be a better project to put forward?
I think, unfortunately, right now we're in a poor position to apply for grants for that project. Officially, according to Bylaw 2312, we don't have responsibility for sewage treatment. We don't have an agreement with the CRD in writing. We simply have a resolution which has some designed to be impossible conditions attached to it, which have now become irrelevant because of the progress of events. But basically what it amounts to is we're not in a position to pass a resolution saying that we would fund our share of it, etc.
Okay, and the other question I have, in the past we have applied for grants, I'm thinking of Machosen Road, for which we received a grant for sidewalks and bicycle lanes, and then we moved the area, changed the area that we were directing that funding to. Would this be similarly able to be transferred to a different area?
You can't guarantee that. However, if the aims of the project are the same as the aims of the project on which you got the approval, I don't think the federal government really cares where in the municipality you do it, as long as it's achieving the same aims, because that is the purpose of the granting.
Thank you, Worship. I do support the resolution, and I think we should be applying for a grant. And when we had the discussion regarding the Kelly Road improvements, it was with a visionary lens, and we knew that with the Belmont site being sold, that corridor will change drastically. Just the traffic will change drastically, and the previous council saw that as an opportunity and saw the sewers as a catalyst for change along that corridor, and that would enhance economic development. And in fact, sewers was probably one of the number one requests by residents when they came to the open house at Herm Williams Park. And I know there have been a few real estate agents that said, you know what, you bring sewers down here, there's an opportunity to assemble properties and redevelop, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is, if you're going to apply for a grant, you need to have a project with drawings and something that's ready to go. And this is, I think, the only project that's got drawings and ready to go, which makes it ripe. And so just looking at what could be versus what is, and I think by applying for this, that tells people what could be and what our expectations are. I'll point to our neighbors who kind of had a similar revelation, I suppose, on Pete Road, and had a vision and said, this is what we want to do. And I think this is a similar type of vision we're looking forward and hopefully securing 2/3. Where the other third comes from, we can have those discussions for sure. And I would like to be creative, but I just want to make sure that we at least get our hat in the ring for that grant, because it's significant and it's a project that's ready to go. Thanks.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you. I don't disagree with anything that Councillor Logan said. Saying that, though, looking at the recommendation, number 2, would we still qualify for, would it still be appropriate if we just put a period after the word project, so we didn't identify where the funds were coming from? Because I just don't feel comfortable having us commit to a specific way that this is going to get funded and then have to come back later in the process and revise it through an LAS or whatever else. That we're just committing at this point that yes, the city will find the 1.8 million, but we'll identify that later down the road. Or do you need to identify specifically where that money is going to come from?
We would have to review very carefully the wording of the grant documents. I know that this has been written to conform with those documents, but I can't say for sure that those particular words absolutely must be there until we reread them. If you would wish to pass the recommendation with a second recommendation that we remove those words if it doesn't make us ineligible, that would work.
Councillor Day.
Thanks. I'd just like to point out that with this development along Kelly Road, if it takes place, there will be considerable redevelopment in the area that will generate considerable development cost charges from that area. So it might be a very appropriate way for it to be funded, so that it's based on the development that occurred that's benefiting from the infrastructure that pays for the infrastructure.
We have a mover and seconder on this one.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
The, okay.
As is.
Yeah.
Okay, I will second that.
Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I want to make
A second motion? Yeah.
So I'd like to make a second motion which says if it does not, if it does not conform, or
If it doesn't make us ineligible.
thank you.
If
If it does not make us ineligible for the grant, that we remove the words on number 2, that basically we put a period after the word project. So we would remove the words with funds to come from the development cost charges.
Seconder on that? Discussion? Councillor Day?
Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't support that because I believe that may put the costs onto all of the taxpayers of Colwood for doing the development, and I think that the development that occurs there should be paying its own way through development cost charges.
Martin?
Thank you. Well, I agree that it shouldn't be put on all the taxpayers. It should be put on the taxpayers of the people who will be benefiting the sewers, just like any other area of that situation. And I also believe that the development cost charges should be going towards other parts of that project. If we're spending $1.8 million, I would prefer to see that $1.8 million spent on sidewalks and other things versus paying for a section of sewer that would benefit a certain area of residents without, whereas other residents within the community have to be financially responsible for their sewers.
Anything else? One more?
Sorry, just So your motion is to leave out what form of funding it is, and you're basically looking at local area service initiative as a way to fund that.
That would be down the road, yeah.
Okay.
But you can't comment on it right
Yeah,
now.
he doesn't
Okay.
know whether it'll fit the format, so. Anybody else? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? No opposed? Carried? 6.3.4, new item again, proposed lease for BC Hydro DC fast charger.
All right, this is an item that's been in the Solar Colwood budget for quite some time, but there were multiple delays in getting to this stage. And we now have a proposed lease before us, given to us by BC Hydro. They would like to fund the installation of a DC fast charger, which is a 20-minute charger, basically, for electric vehicles. And they would like to, they've agreed to a site which is beside our level 2 chargers on the park and ride because of the ease of access to the required electrical power and the public visibility and the fact that it's public land. Their experiences elsewhere in the region, putting them on private land, left them wanting public land only from this point on, and it would have some big advantages to the city. City wouldn't pay towards the installation, and yet we would get what is a small but growing draw to the community, in that anybody traveling significant distances with an electric car absolutely depends on the location of these DC fast chargers. I think it's well placed near several of our businesses that could cater to people who have to make a half-hour stop, but doesn't favor any one business particularly over the others. It would be very close to the hotel and suitable for somebody to drop their bags at the hotel, take the car over and charge it up, and go and get a meal before turning in for the night. I know when I'm booking holidays, first question I ask is, are you near a charger, or do you have one in the hotel? And the cost that we would face is that the city would be responsible for maintenance from the outside paint work on the unit outwards. So we would keep the site clean. We would deal with paint vandalism or small damage to the outside of the unit. I've checked with Nanaimo and Duncan. They haven't had any issues. The Nanaimo one's in a parkade, which is lit, and it's right at the entrance of the parkade, right downtown. So that's a fairly well supervised area. The Duncan one is in front of their library, which after hours is devoid of human presence at all, and it's right near the hockey arena, and would be a place you would expect vandalism, if anywhere, but they haven't had a problem. The charges they have had to incur, which they've only had to incur over a year and a bit, but will be ongoing, is at the current rate of usage in Nanaimo, and they have the best detail. It cost them $2,200 in electricity, and that looks like it was 66 events, 66 different charge events. They pay $310 a year for a service called Green Lots, which basically handles the whole security of access and the collection of payment. And they paid $115 on their insurance. and they only have numbers on income for the last 2 months of 2014 because they weren't charging for it before that. It looks like the charges will balance out the expenditures. So essentially, you can easily charge $15 for a fill up, and at 15 or 20, you can pay for the cost of the electricity plus the green lots, and a bit of a contribution towards keeping the area clean as well. I think it's actually a good idea to charge because while residents in the area won't easily go to a level 2 charger for their electricity, it's really fast to get a charge at a DC fast charger, and there would be people in the area who would be filling up there every day, but not if it costs $15.
Why is he looking at me?
And because they can do it at home for $2. So if you put a charge on there, you make sure it's reserved for people who really need it. Mostly that would be people traveling significant distances. In other words, people visiting your community. So I've included a copy of the lease, and I've read every word of the lease, which was an interesting experience, and I'm sure we have a resolution here once I get to it. The resolution basically is that the council authorized the mayor and acting CAO to sign the offered lease with BC Hydro for a DC fast charger to be located at the park and ride at the southeast corner of Old Island Highway and Ocean Boulevard. One thing I forgot to mention is that if we do develop that site, which seems very likely to me, either with a sewage treatment plant or without, then we would either leave the chargers exactly where they are and just provide a service road to them, or if it made more sense in the project, move them. But the unit would already be paid for. It'd just be a question of relocating it. And certainly if you're building a large building or a sewage treatment plant, the kind of power you're going to bring in to power that building is more than enough for the DC fast charger. So there wouldn't be any cost for new wiring.
Recommendation, mover and a seconder, so we can have a discussion. Second?
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. You answered my first question just about with the treatment, but I guess I'm just asking this. Did we consider putting it over by the library? And the only reason I mention that is because the park and ride is at a premium as it is, and I know there have been some people who have been upset that there's 2 empty spots that sit there throughout the day, and then people are having to park on the road or find other parking, and now it's going to be a 3rd spot that we're taking, whereas if we put it down by the library, then it's not taking up a spot. That was my only, and I'm sure there's some rationale why we didn't do that.
Well, I forgot to mention that we have actually come up with a plan to add a bunch more spots to the park and ride. So, because, we feel keenly the fact that the lost 2 spots, this would make it 3. We have looked at basically getting rid of the little landscaped bump outs that take up a full parking spot, and I think that puts 5 new parking spots. And then some of the people parking there illegally have been very creative and shown us where we could provide more parking spots without a problem. So we'd basically be painting lines around those spots and make one part of it one way to make that safe, and we can get at least 10 more spots.
Do you have any record of how much usage those 2 get there? I know there's an ability to monitor the usage of those.
Yeah, there's a bit of a glitch with the monitoring right now that we haven't sorted out. But in the past, when we monitored it, those two were not heavily used because they're basically there for commuters coming from elsewhere.
Concern is that like it's a long-term parking location, and then you have these quick in and outs, and kind of going along with Councillor Martin in a more populated location for use.
Well, the issue with the DCFC is quite different because they people will go there. It's a destination, you know. I was actually in Vancouver this weekend. I had to do a lot of running around, and there aren't very many DC fast chargers in Vancouver. So wherever I was, I would drive out to BCIT, fill up, and then go about my business till I was getting low, and then drive out to BCIT again. Which, by the way, is powered by a massive solar array with batteries. It's wonderful to visit it and see the future in action. So these things are destination. It doesn't matter where you put them, as it's just
find them.
Yeah, you just want them near your businesses, so your businesses get that 20-minute, half an hour that the person's there. Could be an hour. Could be coffee, could be lunch, and it just helps out the businesses a little bit.
Anybody else? Councillor Day?
Just a question, does the fast charger need to be co-located with the other charger?
It's a huge advantage because depending on how far you got to travel, the fast charger will only take you to 80%, then you have to unplug. And if you plug into a level 2 and wait a bit longer, you can get up to 100%. That gives you a better chance of getting to your next fast charger.
Okay. I was just wondering what the advantages might have been to putting it on the other side of the road near the existing businesses.
Yeah, we couldn't find, there's no public land there that would work. We did try and put it on the piece that used to be road and then was just became grass, but it's private land, and we did initially got cooperation, and then the cooperation died from the private landowner, and BC Hydro said they wanted public land anyway.
Yes, I see the $1 per month in rent, but just curious about how much electricity do you anticipate this using over the course of a year?
Well, in Nanaimo, their first year's experience, and they're probably going to be busier than us, was $2,200 in electricity. But as I say, you can recoup all that from the charges. The $1 a month, adds a very small amount to that.
Not sure how you would go about charging that if you're looking for transient vehicles coming through and using it.
Well, they have to have a special card to unlock the charger, and that's all handled by this agency, Green Lots.
Oh.
And it can either be free or Green Lots. You actually have to pay Green Lots money, and then before your card will work, and then every time you activate a charged charger, if you like, then that's charged to your account with Green Lots, and we get that money.
Okay, thank you.
There was a charger installed at the Capital City Centre showroom, was there not?
Yes, they have a level 2 installed there.
What about a location like that?
Again, it's private property, and currently the biggest issue is the lack of, well, at the time that we were talking with BC Hydro initially, the thing was in receivership, and there was nobody to talk to. And the issue now would be trying to get a lease agreement with an organization that doesn't know what their new design is yet.
Okay. Anybody else? I'll call the question then on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into bylaws, please. 7.1, bylaw number 1562 for final reading. Colwood Main Sewer Local Area Service Bylaw, Establishment and Loan Authorization. Bylaw number 598, 2001.
Move final.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Come back here. 7.2, bylaw number 1560, first, second, and third readings on Colwood sign bylaw, 1988 amendment number 26.
Move introduction.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move second.
Second.
Comments?
I'm not going to be
Councilor Martin?
supporting the bylaw. I feel uncomfortable with the one color phrasing in it, and I won't be supporting the bylaw.
Anybody else? Nothing? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move third.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaw number 7.3, 7.3, bylaw number 1563, first and second readings only. Colwood Official Community Plan, bylaw number 999, 2008, amendment number 9.
Move introduction.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move second.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh,
Oh, sorry, discussion.
discussion? Part? Yes, Councillor Knoll?
Yes, on reviewing this proposal, I'm very concerned with the lack of any flexibility in road access to the rest of the lagoon that this will entail. The original plan had a road going through to Seafield that I thought would provide a secondary access route and provide about the only possibility we have of making a secondary road into this area. Should the proposal go through as on paper, it will basically put all of the traffic through from the entire area through Heather Bell Road and Heather Bell Road only, and Colwood will have no opportunity to improve the road network in or out of that area at that point. We would either have to tear up City Park or lease federal government land to do so, and the odds of either of those are next to nothing. We will be putting in excess, I estimate, of 1,000 homes through that one 2-lane road, and I think living at the end of Belmont Road, I know how awful that is, so I will be opposing this on that basis.
Any other comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. First and second, we are...
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. Clarification, are you voting for these? Because it's a 2-2 vote, and without your
No.
vote, that would be a
Vote
defeat.
carried.
No. She's not voting. It's in the closet. A tie is a defeat. No, but if she doesn't vote, it's in the closet.
Yeah,
I
no.
just wanted to be clear that
Yeah.
the mayor was voting for.
Yes. That's it, folks.
No. 7.4.
Nope, pardon me.
7.4.
Oh, we've got two of those on there. 7.4, bylaw number 1564, first and second readings only. Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 143.
Move introduction.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaw, looking for second?
Move second.
Second.
Conversation, discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Again, it carries. Looking for adjournment, folks.
Move adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Mayor, just for the public, they may want to know that we had already finished our in-camera earlier this evening, and that's why we didn't have any in-camera to adjourn to.
For any of you that needed to know.
Holy cow, look at the time.
Look at the reading I've got to do
Oh, lucky you.
for tomorrow. For tomorrow.
Well, see, that's what happens. Yeah, you get on. Get rid of all the women.
Look at him run.
Some things have not changed. Notice how I pushed back real fast? We had the mic off, right? Yeah, it's all recorded. It's all, yeah.
I think I'll put that on your website.
Thanks. Yeah. I wasn't just referring to you. Oh, that's. No. No. My bruise.